Good evening. I'd like to go ahead and call this meeting to order, November 21st, 6:30. And we'll start with, I guess, the invocation and pledge, and that would be me.
Let us pray. I did actually write it down. So. Let us pray. I pray for healing, comfort, and peace during this time as we send our condolences to our fellow community members in Charlottesville, Virginia, and Colorado Springs. Our hearts and thoughts are with the families who lost loved ones, the university communities, local municipalities. As we prepare to give thanks this holiday season, let us remember the importance of being a supportive, welcoming, inclusive, and loving community. I pray we will work together this evening to conduct business in such a way that it is for the betterment of our residents in this community. In your name I pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So yes, let's just keep everyone lifted up in prayer and thoughts as we go through the holiday season. I want to go ahead and do a proclamation for Arbor Day, December 2nd, 2022. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, it says Robert Halfacre, so I'm standing Robert Halfacre's name in place. Mayor of the City of Clemson, do hereby proclaim December 2nd, 2022 as Arbor Day in the City of Clemson, and I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. And furthermore, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and have caused the great seal of the city to be affixed this 21st day of November, 2022. Right. Is there anyone that we're giving this to? Okay. All right. Next, we have our oath. Police officers' oath. We have another one, so that's great.
Thank you. Madam Councilwoman and council members, I'll call Sergeant Yassine and Telecommunicator Detention Officer Pittman up for their swearing in. Ms. Pittman, a few months ago, finished her detention training, and so we're going to swear her in today. She is 31 years old and was born and raised in Oconee County. She's married, has 3 children, 12, 8, and 6. She graduated from Seneca High School and attended Tri-County Technical College. She's worked at a car dealership and obtained an EMT certification from Tri-County Tech and worked as an EMT in Anderson County before she decided to come work for the Clemson Police Department. So this is Detention Officer Pittman. And Sergeant Yassine, was just recently promoted to sergeant, and he's going to be taking his oath as a sergeant. He is 26 years old, and in 3 days will be 27 years old. He grew up in Walhalla, and has been working in law enforcement since he was 18. He first entered the Army and was a MP in 2014. He joined the the South Carolina Highway Patrol in 2017, and in 2018 he became a member of the Clemson Police Department. And since he's been with the department, he's obtained the rank of Master Patrol Officer and now has successfully competed and selected for sergeant. If you remember, Sergeant Yassine was also our officer a couple of years ago who donated a kidney to a stranger. So he continues that mantra through his career and is very exemplary in his performance and everything that he does. So he gets high marks from his supervisors all the time. So we'll be doing the oath. So I need both of you to, if you wish to place your hand on the Bible, you may, but I need on their left hand and then raise your right hand. Okay. Do you solemnly swear that you're qualified according to the Constitution of the state to exercise the duties of the office to which you've been appointed, and that you will, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties thereof and preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the state and the United States, so help you God? I do. You can put your hands down. And we're going to do the code of ethics for each. We'll first do the jailer code of ethics, and at the end I will ask you if you agree to abide by them, and you will say yes. So, okay. And if not, then we need to have a discussion. Okay, first, as an officer employed in the detention correctional capacity, you swear to be a good citizen and credit to your community, state, and nation at all times. You abstain from all questionable behavior which might bring disrepute to the agency for which you work, your family, your community, and your associates. Your lifestyle will be above reproach and will constantly strive to set an example of a professional who performs her duties according to the laws of our state, country, and community, and the policies, procedures, written, verbal orders, and regulations of the agency for which you work. On the job, you promise to keep the institution secure, so to safeguard your community and the lives of the staff, inmates, and visitors on the premises. Work with each individual firmly and fairly without regard. Maintain a positive demeanor when confronted with stressful situation of scorn, ridicule, danger, and chaos. Report either in writing or by word of mouth to the proper authorities those things which should be reported, and keep silent about matters which are to remain confidential according to the laws and rules of the agency and government. Manage and supervise the inmates in an even-handed and courteous manner. Refrain at all times from becoming personally involved in the lives of the inmates and their families. Treat all visitors to the jail with politeness and respect, and do your utmost to ensure they observe the jail regulations. Take advantage of all education and training opportunities designated to assist you in becoming a more competent officer. Communicate with people in or outside the jail, whether by phone, written word, or mouth, in such a way so as not to reflect in a negative manner upon your agency. Contribute to the jail environment which will keep the inmate involved in activities designated to improve his or her attitude and character. Support all activities of a professional nature through membership and participation that will continue to elevate the status of those who operate our nation's jails. And do your best through word and deed to present an image to the public at large of a jail professional committed to progress for an improved and enlightened criminal justice system. Do you agree? Okay. I'll also remind you that this position is also our 911 operator, so she's mostly sitting behind a computer terminal answering phones in 911, but when inmates come in, she's booking them in, and she's also monitoring the jail while they're in there and doing the proper checks and everything that needs to be done, her and whoever she works with. Okay. Sergeant Yassine. the law enforcement code of ethics, which you will abide by. Okay, you ready? As a law enforcement officer, your fundamental duty is to serve the community, to safeguard lives and property, to protect the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression or intimidation, and the peaceful against violence or disorder, and to respect the constitutional rights of all to liberty, equality, and justice. You will keep your private life unsullied as an example to all and will behave in a manner that does not bring discredit to me or my agency. You will maintain courageous calm in the face of danger, scorn, or ridicule, develop self-restraint, and be constantly mindful of the welfare of others. Honest in thought and deed, both in your personal and official life, you will be exemplary in obeying the law and the regulation of your department. Whichever you see or hear of a confidential nature or that is confided to you in official capacity will be kept ever secret unless revelation is necessary in the performance of your duty. You will never act officiously or permit personal feelings, prejudices, political beliefs, aspirations, animosities, or friendships to influence your decisions. With no compromise for crime and with the relentless prosecution of criminals, you will enforce the law courteously and appropriately without fear or favor, malice or ill will, never employing unnecessary force or violence, and never accepting gratuities. You recognize the badge of your office as a symbol of public faith, and that you will accept it as a public trust to be held as long as you are true to the ethics of police service. You will never engage in acts or corruption or bribery, nor will you condone such acts by other police officers. You will cooperate with all legally authorized agencies and their representatives in the pursuit of justice. You know that you alone are responsible for your own standard of professional performance and will take every reasonable opportunity to enhance and improve your level of knowledge and competence. You will constantly strive to achieve these objectives and ideals, dedicating yourself before God and your chosen profession, law enforcement. Do you agree? I agree. Well, thank you very much. I have with me your motion warrant, which basically says certificate of appointment. To all may be concerned, greetings. Know ye that the reposing a special trust and confidence in the prudence, integrity, and ability of Zachary Yassine, who has met all the requirements for sergeant. And it has all the dates that it was signed. So congratulations to you both. So pictures, family members, no pictures, both of you together, everybody.
We can't. He's that short. When he's 9 feet tall, we can. But don't slouch. And Bob. It's true. It's true.
Excellent timing.
Not going to disagree with that. Bram was too close to me. He could have hit me. Bob had two people between me and him.
So we're stuck here.
Well, thank you. Congratulations again. It's always good to see the progress and promotion and the commitment. So we thank you for your service. Appreciate you. And just let me announce, Mayor Halfacre is attending a conference in Myrtle Beach. He wants to be sure I let you all know that's the reason for his absence, or else he would be here today. So I just want to make sure I said that for the record. Now I will turn it over to John Duckworth for the public session.
Thank you. So for up to the next 30 minutes, we'll have public session for any item that is not on the agenda tonight. We ask you come up to speak, give us your name, address, or if you're calling in, give us your name and address. And each speaker will limit their time to 3 minutes or less. And so public session is now open. We have no calls. Oh, all right. Come up to the podium and give us your name and address and sign in, and Anything not on the agenda, you got up to 3 minutes.
Okay, cool. Well, my name is Brady Craig. I live at 215 Lindsay Road, Clemson, South Carolina, 29631. I'm here tonight because I've heard talk that there's, talk about a skate park possibly being built in Clemson, a skateboard park. And I just want to help, help move that idea forward. I think that it would be like a great contribution to the community. Skateboarding was in the Olympics, this past Olympics they had, and it's growing as a sport, and there are a lot of Clemson students that are getting into it. I've been skateboarding for 16 years now, and, a lot of my best relationships and most meaningful moments in my life have happened because of and through skateboarding, and I would just like to allow other people to have that opportunity, to build those relationships and overcome those obstacles, For people who skateboard, it's a lot more than a hobby. It's a way of life. It really is. You think about it all the time. And I just think that for the city of Clemson to have something for skateboarders to facilitate their passion would be a great contribution to this community, to Pickens County. It'd be the only skateboard park in Pickens County if Clemson decided to do that. And my wife and I, she's outside with our son right now, we work closely with Miss Roland Lee in Westminster. I don't know if you guys are familiar with her, but she's a member of the city council out there. We tried for several years to try to get a skateboard park out there to no avail, But our hope is that Clemson is large enough and progressive enough to where they could see that something like that could be a contribution to the community. And Miss Roland Lee, before she passed away, with the help of other skateboarders, managed to secure $10,000 that was fundraised and such to go towards something like that in Westminster, though sadly it never was. And my wife and I now personally have access to those funds to, help in any way to jumpstart that. If that's something that you all would consider. The only condition is that there be a plaque with Miss Roland Lee's name on it at the park for that contribution, because that was her dream, was to have a skateboard park in Westminster, because there's nothing to do there,
Been there.
Yeah, you guys know. And, I think that, just having one here, it really would. People would come from all over. Myself, yesterday, I drove 45 minutes to Greenville to go to a skateboard park. Before then, the day before, I drove an hour and a half to go to another skateboard park. And I do it, we all do it if we have to. So I know that something like that in Clemson would be a draw to many other skateboarders like myself from outside the county. So thank you for your consideration of that.
If we can get your contact information, maybe we can put you with Parks and Rec, in touch with those guys, and as plans evolve and there's opportunities to participate, you always want citizen input. So if we could get maybe an email from you, we could connect with that.
Yes, sir. Well, is there any specific place I could email, or?
If you want to write it up, there's a sign-in sheet up there. If you want to put your email on there, we'll have it there, and we can go from there. So thank you for your comment.
It'd be a nice contrast with all the pickleball. I think that would.
That's right.
Yeah.
Getting pickleball.
I cringe when I hear the word pickleball, because that's always the opposition. It's like park or pickleball court.
Put the two of them, bigger court, a little curvature in it.
That'd be fun. Oh.
So,
yeah, I'll put that all there, but thank you.
Any other public comment? Anybody dialed in?
We have a couple dialed in, but no hands.
No hands up?
Hands up.
All right, well, thank you for your comments, and seeing nobody else running to the podium, we will call the public session closed. The meeting is yours, Ms. Smith.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. At this point, we will go ahead and approve the minutes. We have several to approve. We'll start with November 7th.
I move we approve the minutes as written for November 7th.
Okay.
One change.
One change.
Now, I know I change my mind a lot, and people say I'm indecisive. But if you go to page 2 of the minutes, where it's consider the first reading of an ordinance to allow single-family homes, it actually says that McGuire voted for it, and McGuire also voted against it. So,
I'm not shocked.
I know, so I'm not sure which way I want to go, but I'm still indecisive, so.
You can hold a.
Do you remember how you voted? Actually, I voted again.
Voted again.
But it was nice to see my name twice.
Any other corrections? All right, so, motion carried. Any, further discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay. We also need to approve the special call minutes for November 8th. Do I have to go by each one? I guess I do. November 8th. Can I combine them all? Huh? I do each one. Okay. For November 8th.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes of November 8th as presented.
Second.
That was for the Grange annexation. Any discussion? No further discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. No opposed? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes, special call minutes for November 14th, which were the, board member?
I move we approve minutes as written.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Right. And then the last is November 15th, with the Grange annexation. Is there a motion?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes of November the 15th as presented. Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All right, thank you. Next, we would move on to discussion for, plurality versus majority runoff election method. This was something that we, had talked about possibly discussing prior to the election, but thought it would be better to wait until after the election, just so that, there wouldn't be any concerns, issues raised, in terms of moving forward one way or the other. So we wanted to kind of bring this, to the attention, of council to see where we would want to go. As right now, we do the majority, runoff election, and the concern was that possibly we would want to go to just, the top three or, of the seats and go in that direction, because when there is the runoff, there is a cost associated with it. This is even prior to the, information that we received regarding, some of the rules that have come in place that we have to consider now, in terms of, even years versus odd years. But this is something that we just wanted to have some discussion as to whether or not we would want to, consider going from the plurality, the majority runoff back to the, to plurality, where it's the majority, the top three votes. So I don't know if there are any questions you all have, or if Mary or Andy, you have any information you'd like to provide us with to give us a history perspective, or if there are concerns with either one.
I think that, I guess I need to do something with this, I think there's pros and cons with both, and that's certainly something that I'm sure y'all will consider. Under the majority vote, it sounds easy, but actually you have to apply a formula based on the total number of votes cast to determine what constitutes a majority. And once you divide that by the number of positions and all, and you come up with your number, it's that number plus one. And if, the top three candidates don't each have that, then you have a runoff plus one for however many seats are still open that didn't reach that. So it does require a runoff. The plurality, and I don't know why they come up with these terms like plurality, that makes no sense to people. Doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sure there's some definition for it, but, plurality, that method is, it seems simple on its face, but the problem is that it varies, according with the number of candidates. So what you could have happen was, even if you had two people that maybe came close to the majority number, you could still have somebody elected with maybe, say, 11% of the vote, which would mean that 88% of the voters did not vote for that candidate. And that's the drawback, but that is dependent on the number of seats that you have open and the number of candidates that would spread that vote across. There is a third method, and I know it's not specifically mentioned, but it is in the statute, and I'll throw that out for you. It doesn't solve the problem of the extra cost of the runoff, For nonpartisan, elections, there are three methods. There's plurality, there's the majority vote like we currently have, and, there's also a, primary system where you narrow the number of people running for a particular seat to two, and then the voters actually in their election, in the second election would choose one or the other. And that takes it to a majority based on that seat. Of course, requires two elections, your primary election and your actual election, so it doesn't.
You have to move to districts too, because we don't have designated seats either.
Right.
That's right. I've seen it done a couple different ways where people, choose a seat, like you just have 1, 2, 3, and they choose a seat. If you were gonna do it if you're gonna switch to wards, that is how you would do it, exactly. That is actually the rarer way to do it with respect to nonpartisan, but it is in the statute.
Andy, do you happen to know how many times or if recently we would have gone to a runoff? I mean, trying to think of recent elections.
I think the election prior to this one was a runoff.
Yeah, Fran and I were in a runoff.
I think I've been on here for 7 different elections, and that's the only one. There may have been a second.
Well, this most recent one didn't, the one, ours. Ours didn't, so it was 2 ago.
Right, it was the
I'm going
18th.
back to 7 elections I'm thinking of, I said, and I know that one, thinking that's it.
1 and 2018.
I'm a very simple man. I think that the majority of people should choose who sits up here. And I understand that with a runoff, you may have a narrower pool. I mean, that's okay. You can have motivated people at that point. So to me, it just makes sense that you have a majority. The expense, I know we budget for it every year. We roll it over. And what do we budget? 10 grand for that?
But we always plan on a runoff. It's never really a surprise.
Right, so I'm saying, but, so whatever numbers we budget, I mean, it's there, it's rarely used. I just kind of like that. The plurality always scares me if you have a large field and you diminish the vote amongst people. You know, if you have a field of 12 people, it had never happened. Sometimes, some years we've looked to have people to run, but.
If we have a runoff, what I'm wondering about is voter access. So do we open back up all of the access points again?
Right,
We have to.
all of those.
And I think the rationale was, because one of the concerns prior to, like I said, before we got the information about the odd versus even, was that the Pickens County felt like it was costly to do it in that manner. And so if we were thinking that if there was a way to keep the cost down, so the plurality method would do that. Like I said, there's the pros and cons, but we wouldn't have to worry about a runoff, because with that method, there is no runoff regardless.
Unless there's a tie.
Unless there's a tie, right. But that was the rationale, for considering that, and then maybe that would help with some of the concerns, with having the even years as well, because that is something I think that they keep expressing is the concerns about the cost, especially when we did the runoff in 2018, but then, the special elections is not up for discussion because they even brought that to our attention, but that would have happened regardless when, Robert ran for mayor and had to do the special election. This does not address that at all. This is truly about the actual election. So, but that was the reason for the consideration in bringing that to this.
The runoff has a shorter early voting period.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference.
I'm with John, I agree how we do it now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Makes sense, I think.
right.
Okay.
We all agree with John.
Wow.
Wow, yeah, that's right.
I'm gonna pull this one off of YouTube and save it.
Red letter there.
It's been recorded, so it's down. Well, thank you all for that discussion. We will, still, I believe we're going to have an opportunity to talk more about the odd and even. So we'll have that opportunity. Next is to discuss the ordinance, proposed ordinance for bikes and scooters. We're doing it on campus somewhere.
We're doing what?
I said we're having discussions like this on campus.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so, about a year, maybe a little bit longer ago, in some discussions, it was brought to the attention that our current city ordinance under 18-23, basically regarding bicycles, states, it shall be unlawful for any person to operate a bicycle upon any sidewalk or any pedestrian walkway in the city. And it applied citywide. That ordinance was passed in 1989. So in discussions with Chad and his wife about the Green Crescent Trail and some of the discussions the city is having about the planning for that, we started having these discussions. So we have the trail, but how do people get to the trail? And then we started talking about the events they have at Clemson Elementary, where they encourage riding, walking, or rolling to school. Well, again, if you ever go to that event, all those kids that are riding bikes or taking scooters or roller skates or skateboards are all on the sidewalk. I don't believe the city thought, back when this ordinance was passed, that it would have an unintended consequences of prohibiting all of that kind of activity, but that's what the current ordinance does. So we began a discussion of how do we fix this, and I did some research and found that the reason for this ordinance that came about, well, first, the state, under the South Carolina State Code 565710, gives the municipality the ultimate authority to regulate what happens on their sidewalks. So that's how this ordinance came into effect. And it was also based on information I received because of people riding bicycles in the downtown area, in the merchant corridors, and people coming out of those stores and getting clipped by bicycles, almost getting hit, so on and so forth. So that's why the ordinance came about, which we started discussing, okay, so how do we make an ordinance that would accommodate both and be better managed? And as we were having this discussion, the discussion about scooters came up, and skateboards, and one-wheels, and all of the other devices that are starting to come about, and electric bicycles and e-bicycles. So we had a couple of community meetings. Chad and his wife assisted in that, and we did some focus groups, and we looked at some ordinances that are out there. We looked at Charleston, we looked at Columbia, we looked at a bunch of Greenville, a bunch of places that had ordinances, and we looked at what they had and what we liked, what we didn't like, and we put some things together. I then kind of got put on the table for a little bit because some other things that were going on, and then it came back up again recently when school started back up again. We saw an explosion of scooters being used this year. So we re-resurrected this discussion, brought it before the Police Advisory Board, had several discussions, subcommittees, and we've come up with the ordinance that's before you today. I sent out another copy of it today because we made a change, but we missed striking some things out of that, and that had to do with e-bicycles. So you should have another copy in your email of the strike-through copy, which basically puts e-bikes in the same ordinance as the bicycles. When we went on this quest, I also had a meeting with our subcommittee and invited Lieutenant Courtney Wright from the University Police Department, and we have on our board our student representative, Riley Wright, who's here, and he can speak. We wanted to make sure whatever we came up with wasn't too different than what they're doing on campus. So there wouldn't be any confusion that if you're on this side of 93, you got to do this with your bike. When you're on that side of 93, you got to do this with your bike or scooter or whatnot. You saw the communications that went out recently from the university about best practices when using these devices, and then another email saying, well, if you're doing it recklessly, we're going to start enforcing it. Now, I asked the university police chief this past weekend, well, how are you going to enforce it? What are you going to enforce? Well, those of you that work at the university know this and went to the university know this. They have a student code of conduct, and in the student code of conduct, it says that you have to operate these devices safely, and if you don't, you can be cited. And then the sanctioning, it has to go through their student dean's office, so on and so forth. They have discussed citing under state law. So if it's anything where you've run a stop sign, run a traffic light, or anything like that, they're going to cite under those as well. Now, I thought about that as well before we went trying to put an ordinance in place, and we reached out to the Department of Transportation and the Highway Patrol's legal office and asked their guidance on this, if state law adequately addresses these devices in state law. And their advice to us was kinda. And they said the definition of a vehicle is grayly defined when it comes to these devices, but specifically defined when it comes to vehicles that have to be licensed through the state. So when you're cited for a traffic infraction in a vehicle that's licensed, it's clear that it is a licensed vehicle, and that's what you're operating when you violate that section of the law. And they gave the advice that you're better off passing a city ordinance to cite until the state law comes around and addresses it. So that's why we went down the road of trying to put a city ordinance in place to address these things. And Riley has gone back, and Riley, you can speak, don't let me speak for you, of what the Senate's position, you'd have to come up here and speak, you can't speak from back there. What the Student Senate's conversations were and that.
So good evening, y'all. So Student Senate and the student body generally agrees that the devices, when whatever they may be, scooters, skateboards, whatever, are net positive and are especially important for a lot of people commuting from maybe adjacent to campus that don't want to necessarily deal with driving or having to deal with the parking on campus. That being said, I can name 3 people off the top of my head who have been run into by someone on a scooter on campus or slightly off campus. So we collectively agreed that the best way to do it would be have some sort of regulation, both some kind of enforcement action that the campus can take, and that's what they've begun doing. But I also believe the city, within the city, is important as well, because it's not just where the devices aren't just coming from on campus, but they're also, it's the Clemson students that are operating them, the vast majority of. So I believe that this regulation will help address and will help bring greater awareness to the fact that when you're operating, when students are operating these kind of devices on campus and off campus, that they need to take safety into greater consideration, because as of now, it seems like people just kind of drive around on them like they have no care in the world and don't realize that they are in fact going 20 miles an hour. So.
Riley, I have a question. Is there any discussion about registering your scooters so that we would have a better way of sort of tracking how many there are, that kind of thing?
Not to my knowledge, there hasn't been any conversation of that, but yeah, no, ma'am.
One thing I'll add in our ordinance is you'll see the fine amounts in there, and Miriam, I'll put you on the spot here. So the current bicycle ordinance as it stands, if we were to charge somebody with a violation of that, it's a second-degree misdemeanor. More than likely, it will go to the municipal court, and the first sanction would be a fine. And what would that fine normally be monetarily?
You know, I've never seen this citation since I've been here, so I don't know.
So I don't know what the schedule, average misdemeanor fine would be well over $100, I would assume.
Well, the smaller misdemeanors, I mean, you know, they may be anywhere from $75 to $110 as it moves up. The court has sort of a guideline that they'll use once they've heard the case to put in there, and it may come up in law track, a certain thing, but I honestly have never seen this. And I'm not sure
what it is either, but the methodology behind the fines that are listed here is $75 is around what a non-moving citation infraction for a state law violation would be, and then the additional fine amounts for additional offenses just graduate up from there. And since it is an ordinance, we want to get compliance before we start swinging the stick, for lack of a better description, and that's why we have that in there. Any questions?
Yeah. All right, first of all, where are the dismount zones in the city?
So I purposely didn't put it in the ordinance because I think that's an administrative thing that we can decide without having to go back and change the ordinance every single time we want. But the thought is, and I've had discussions with staff, is between Keith and 93 on College and the adjacent streets in that area, so the heavily retail area where we have a lot of heavy pedestrian traffic, for the most part, would be the dismount zone areas. And if you look on campus, and there's campus people in the room, that's kind of where their dismount zones are. It's in the core of campus amongst where they have a lot of pedestrians usually confined in that area.
Okay, well then, that said, I don't think you defined a dismount zone for 18-35. I mean, you haven't, I don't think it's, I can't find it, but that doesn't mean it's not there. All right, so the question on the dismount zone, so let's say we do it from 93 to Key. So if you're on a bike, then the bike has to be walked through there, or if you're on a skateboard, it has to be carried through there. Is that the plan?
I'm sorry, I was looking for the dismount zone in 1835, and it's under 4A, number 3.
Riley's saying yes, though.
Yes, the dismount zone would, and just to note, because of how it's written, it doesn't prohibit someone from driving, the device in the roadway as long.
No, I got that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if they're in the dismount zone, they can't ride it.
Right, they have to be in the street or
walking it
through
in
there.
the sidewalk.
Right, I get that part of it, okay. So, but right now, the only area you're talking about designating for the dismount zone is that between 93 and Keith at this point, is that correct?
Well, again, that's for the administrator and I to discuss, but I can't think, nobody's brought to my attention another area of concern, and there may very well be, as development occurs, you know, you do the Uptown area gets redeveloped, there may be an area in there that you create a dismount zone because there's too much pedestrian traffic in there.
Well, I guess the other question I got, this is probably more for the students, is Dotted Hills and Cherry, that big intersection right there, just seems to be an awful lot of mixed use as far as the bikes and the scooters and everything else through there. I'm surprised we haven't had somebody already run over by a bike in that area. So is that considered a dismount zone as far as the university is concerned?
So, okay.
I don't think so.
I don't think it is. And to be totally honest, there's only a singular dismount zone on campus that I can think of, and it's on it passes by the soccer field, down towards the basketball stadium. There's almost there's a pedestrian footbridge that parallels 93.
Right, yeah.
And that's the only dismount zone on campus I can think of.
I think there's one by the amphitheater. Amphitheater.
That's good.
Yeah.
93. Yeah.
The central sidewalk is, that being said, however, the intersection, no one necessarily listens to those.
No, that's the whole problem, that's honestly the whole problem in downtown, because I mean, I suspect if we did the dismount zone and we made it 93 to Keith, which I think it should be, I know it's just a little stretch, it almost ought to be 93 to Riggs, but either way, I mean, it's an awful lot of danger, in my opinion, because they're coming down that hill, and they come into that light, and, I mean, I've seen them just blow through it. I mean, even though they need to be stopping because it's a red light, and they're risking their lives in doing so. So, and I've seen them come down the other way. I saw a bad accident with a kid. Thank God he had a helmet on, but he was on a skateboard, and right there, kind of sort of by the post office, right there and there. He hit that rough area where they have kind of like the brick-like work through there, and he lost control of it. I mean, if he hadn't had his helmet on, I'm not certain he'd have survived. So, but that's the speed part of it, and, I mean, I think my bigger issue with this, I guess I'm okay with it all, but enforcement, I don't know how you're gonna enforce this.
Well, kind of in some of the same veins now, because I've always really kind of liked these things off the sidewalks, but I understand the schools and unintended consequence. I do worry about an unintended consequence of all of a sudden 123 gets a lot of bikes up and down the sidewalks, but for me, I agree with the administrative side to a point. I just think for simplicity, though, something like College Avenue ought to be named. I mean, it ought to be in there because until we put bike paths, until we put something significant or different on there, you're not gonna want anybody on those sidewalks. And then in areas of town where there are bike paths, so let's say you're going down 93 towards Central or somewhere where there's a wide enough lane or anything through there. If there's a bike path, or as we evolve our bike path program and put paths in, would you be required to be on the bike path, or would you still have the option to go to the sidewalk? Because to me, if you have an option to take a path, you ought to go to the path and not be in conflict with the pedestrian on the sidewalk walking.
If I understand the law correctly, only bicycles are allowed to use the bike path. So if the bike path is on a state road, only the state law regulates the bike, but does not regulate the skateboard, the scooter, the one wheel. So then allowing them to use the sidewalk gives them a mode until we have a bikeway or pathway or multimodal pathway that they can use to traverse that. So there we run into a conflict of state law. And again, because that is a state road, this ordinance would not apply to the roadway, A, because it's a higher speed limit, and B, it's a state road. So I can't regulate what you do on a state road with a city ordinance. So those hurdles come into play when we start talking about state roads. So that's what we're talking about College Avenue, because there was a discussion of going from 123 all the way to 93. Well, the stretch of College Avenue from 123 to Edgewood is a state road, and then from Edgewood to 93, it's a city road. So anything that we put into play there would only apply to the sidewalks in that area and not the roadway.
And that, I was gonna say, with Bixby, there's a lot more people walking up that sidewalk and down that sidewalk, at least on the same side as the churches, than there ever has been. So I would think, that's not a great place for them to be on the sidewalk either. And I agree with John that, I see it every day, multiple coming down that hill, flying. And not that being in the road, they're gonna slow down, but that's not a good place. Something bad's
We
gonna happen
attempted
there.
to address that by putting the verbiage in here that the pedestrians have the right-of-way in the sidewalk when using the sidewalk. Because the further away from the downtown you get, there are stretches of sidewalk that are not heavily traveled, or there are times of the day where there aren't pedestrians there, and we didn't want to be in a position to tell someone they could not use the sidewalk during those times. So I fought with, and we fought with, well, how do we write it in such a way that, okay, I'll say it, it's 5 o'clock in the morning and there's nobody on the sidewalk. Are you going to tell somebody they can't ride their bike or they can't ride their scooter? Or do we just use officer discretion and look this way when we go past them? All that can occur. I'm not going to say it's not, but we're trying to encapsulate that and still put a provision in there to say, if there's a lot of pedestrians there, you got to give them the right of way. And if you're being reckless around them, then you're in violation.
Well, it's cautionary to me, because like you were saying, you have friends who've been hit, and right now, there's nothing if someone hurts someone on College Avenue because they're riding on the sidewalk. There doesn't seem to be any ticket or any punishment if you cause that because of your going 35 miles an hour down College Avenue. So that's sort of how I see it.
So what you're saying though, I do like the fact that you've got the areas here in there, so we can define those.
Talking about the dismount zone?
Yes.
Yes.
We can define those.
And I'll defer to Andy, if we don't put it in the ordinance, but we make it a city policy that it goes, council still has a say into where those zones are, and then that way we can change without having to change the ordinance every time.
We can debate between Edgewood or Riggs and 93, but that's not the debate we need to make tonight. We can ultimately
Can I
define
interject, because Fran had his hand up, so.
I'm sorry.
I want,
Just two quick, I have not read this, so if this is in this fine. So does this include requirements that bikes and those things have to have some kind of sound-making device? That's one question. And two is, does it leave the authority in the police to close roads certain times, busy times, streets are closed times? Is there a phrase, so if downtown is closed on Friday for a game, can you also then prevent the bikes and skateboards? If a particularly busy day, like the day of graduation. So anyway, is there opportunity, and is there a sound requirement that at least if you're coming down the road, you make some kind of sound to warn old people that here I come?
The police chief has the power to control traffic on the sidewalks and roadways, just as a general matter. So yes, he could do that. I have seen ordinances both ways. Chapel Hill, North Carolina actually named the streets on which you can't ride bikes and scooters and that kind of thing. But I've also seen another way where It's just, they haven't delineated the dismount zones or the streets on which, scooters are prohibited. But as a general matter, the chief currently has the power to control traffic on sidewalks.
And the lighting requirement, so we added the lighting requirement for the scooters. And I'm sorry to say, I don't remember off the top of my head if the state law I think state law requires lights on bikes. And
Noisemakers?
Noisemakers, I'm not sure of, but we did put in here that if you're overtaking a pedestrian, you have to give an audible indication that you're overtaking them.
Mhm.
So that is in this ordinance, especially for the scooters. But, I'm sorry, I've read so many different ones, I'm not sure if the state law requires that right now.
I think one of,
I was just gonna say, I mean, you know, what the university did, they came out with their typical soft language in the first email of, you know, we hope that you do this, and then they came out a little bit stronger. If we do leave it open with dismount zones and being able to administratively do those, I mean, and I think we need to, I thought, you know, John back there had a good, you know, weeks ago when he said, you know, we need to have a campaign of, if you're not on your feet, get in the street, you know, kind of thing. And, we need to have a campaign and give people a little time and space. And then if it's not working, we can say, look, if this doesn't get better and we don't, you know, I've heard more about this in the last month and a half than almost anything in 2 years. If this doesn't get better, the number of dismount zones are gonna grow and grow and grow until you're just not gonna be able to have these things in town. And, you know, I think that's a smart way to handle it. We can be a little adaptable as we go along, not pin ourselves in or, you know.
one of the things I like about the dismount zone downtown, 93 to Keith or 93 to Riggs, wherever it is, you know, the officer that's there doing the parking, she's in a position where she can observe people own or not own bikes or skateboards, and so she could literally stop them, warn them, whatever the case may be. So I think that is at least a good way to enforce that, because she's there 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And she's very visible. I got one other thing.
I was gonna say, okay, I had one question, but go ahead.
So it's another piece of this, if you want to talk about this part, because it's.
No, it's different from this.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's part of it's about the rental.
Right, me too. Okay. So, you want to say it? I don't care.
I just wanna know what's the rationale that, we would not allow people to rent.
So I know you saw the email that, Eunice sent everyone, and I
I mean, and I had the
I
same
don't,
thought.
in the future, have an objection to rentals, but nobody has been able to figure out how to stop the renting and dumping of these devices all over the place. And she mentions in her email that, you know, there are some places that have it, but when I talk to those places that look like they got a handle on it, it's an inordinate amount of staff time for the city, because they're the ones that are picking them up. Even though they say they require their company to do it, the company doesn't do it or doesn't do it well enough. And I know in her email, she says, well, we'll just pull their business license. Well, when was the last time we pulled somebody's business license? I mean, how far does it have to go before we do that? And then how much staff time are we wasting? So once they figure that out, or that is tackled, I think by prohibiting the rentals and having this provision here about an abandoned one, it's something someone owns. So something that they own gets taken and they have to pay a fine to get it back. They'll be a little more careful about just dumping it somewhere. If it's something they don't own, I think a lot of those rental businesses will just use it as a cost of doing business and raise the prices for the rental. And I think that's what they're doing in a lot of other jurisdictions, and that's why I oppose it, because I don't want them dumped up everywhere. The ones that are owned now, I mean, the university will tell you, and they'll show you pictures, they park them everywhere. They have problems with them riding them in the buildings to their classes or to their dorm rooms, or when they come in, instead of parking it outside, they bring it inside and park it, and then next thing you know, you got 20 of them stacked up. So until we figure that out, and you know, I think the rentals will just add to that chaos, and until we're able to regulate that better, I'll be opposed to it.
You can Google that, and you can find horror stories from cities that have those rental programs. I know, like it was San Diego or somewhere, business owners and residents were finding them, they were all over the place. They were taking them and throwing them off the pier into the ocean.
I know. Well, I gotta ask this
Because they became such
But
a
I wasn't, I don't know if it's, because you have those rental programs, but I'm thinking if, there's a business that's what they do.
Yeah, I just
So that would
wanna
be a little different, because you would actually, sometimes you have to provide, something to that business in order, to rent it, and then in order to get your money back, or maybe a deposit or something, in order to get it back, you have to bring the bike back or the.
because designated drop-off zones
Yeah.
is what I was thinking, and then
No.
if you find one, you take it.
Well, let me ask you this, do y'all, on campus, they have the bikes that are rental bikes, is that, I mean, those bikes aren't just left around, are they? They're generally returned to the location.
They're attached to it.
We call the
What do we
university
do with
all the
those
time to
bikes?
come get them.
Oh, you do?
But, I mean, they're left out, I mean, they're.
But I mean,
Had a lot of
when
people
you,
trying to open these businesses in town, or
Yeah,
anyone tried
that's
to
what I'm
open?
So let me give you an example of a,
Anyone tried to open a business?
not that I'm aware of, but this is a possibility, okay? We have all these housing units or apartments going in. Hey, come rent the apartment from us and we'll give you a free scooter.
Well,
Okay, as part of your rental, okay? So now you've got, I mean, I've seen it.
rental scooter at that point, because I wouldn't say that was rental business.
It's not rental, it's theirs, but they got it as part of their rental and, you know, they.
Well,
It's free.
I don't think we're preventing a rental business.
let me ask you this, we could actually get here, you struck it from here, it's still gotta go, the business has gotta go through the approval process to come to town anyway. I just think, if you, I'd rather leave it out, knowing that we may have to change the ordinance later, but that's fine.
Well, I would ask Andy, can you, if a business came and wanted to, there wasn't a prohibition for them to exist and wanted a business license, can we arbitrarily say no?
No, we can't pick and choose who does business here.
Jay,
I speak a little bit on that, because we've looked into these quite a bit from this end of it. Right now, you would not be able to do the bird style one, like just where they can be let off anywhere. From a zoning point of view, if you wanted to do a brick and mortar store where you were renting them from, had to be returned them, that you could do in the city. It's just from a zoning point of view, nothing to do with this ordinance, but just from a planning point of view. We do not have it in the ordinance, a way to do the bird style one where there's no brick and mortar.
And the brick and mortar thing reminded me, because that went back to when the moped rentals and stuff were coming up, and there's certain screenings and prohibitings for noise and sight to the public, if I remember.
That is correct. It's covered under any of our vehicle rental things, so all the equipment has to be stored in the back, screened from view. You couldn't just have them
You couldn't have
lined
a
out in the front.
showroom set up in the middle, I mean,
Correct.
I don't remember all the details, I forgot, it's pretty
Yeah, 'cause it's-
restrictive.
Exactly, it's the same thing, it's set up for rental cars, that's why you don't see a bunch of rental car agencies here.
If somebody wanted to rent scooters, it was gonna be
Yeah, you have to
under
go
our
through it.
terms and
Right.
very, much not a nuisance to the public, and I would see crafting something for these things that same way.
Yeah, and just as from a planning perspective, every time there's new technology when it comes to transportation, the society as a whole kind of has to evolve to really get their arms around it. We all recognize these scooters are here to stay and are gonna be a part of transportation as future goes on. It's just, it is so new. I kind of like how the chief is approaching this. They realize that we have to figure out something. I think his ordinance is pretty actually well thought out, and it may evolve though. I mean, it's probably gonna change as we kind of, society gets used to them.
Any other discussion?
I had one thought, and the chief and I have talked a good bit about the rental aspect, because I was like, that's a business, and certainly scooters are here, but I think I was thinking about renting cars. You can rent a car for, a day or something, but if you don't return it, it's gonna get really expensive. On the other hand.
Or be a felony.
That's true. But I was thinking, there's sort of a difference between short-term rentals where you rent the scooter for 20 minutes and just drop it when you're done, and it stops moving and it comes off your credit card, versus, when you rent a car, or you buy a car, lease a car, you rent it for a longer period of time. So I was thinking about that as might be another thing for you all to consider with short-term versus long-term rentals, because I think it's really the short-term things where you can just drop it and you're done paying for it. That's really the problem there. Now, I could be wrong about that because I don't rent scooters, but I was just thinking about it in terms of short-term versus long-term rentals.
A longer period of time. Okay.
I would think it's not just short-term, long-term, but I think as long as the scooter's looked at as something that's disposable, it's gonna get left behind. I think a lot of students rent them because they are disposable. They don't rent them for the fun of driving from here to here. They rent it because they need to be in class in 10 or 12 minutes. So whatever this thing is, I think if the scooter's a disposable item that it can be left behind with no consequence, that's gonna be the problem.
All right.
So, if there's no, if any of you, I'm not seeing, or hearing a desire to change anything other than the latter part of our conversation about the rental, but it doesn't seem like we've gone in any particular direction. So I think the next step would be for a first reading, unless you want to change or you want further discussion to.
I'm not sold on the rental.
Yeah, I just was, I may look into the rental piece a little bit more, but
Okay.
we can
So
still
do you
get
want
to
to, I'll get with Andy and see how we go through that
Maybe peel
process.
that out and add it in or something, I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe
can
we
we
have
leave it out?
conversations between, but I'd kind of like to have more conversation with you and with Jacob about other ways to do it, like what we did with the moped rental style place, to see if there's some ways we can add protections or boxes. Maybe end up right back where you started, but you got a head start on this with us, so I
Okay.
gotta get my mind to there from where it
So
is.
is that the only part of the ordinance that you saw that you want addressed before we come back for a first reading? Okay.
You to think a little bit more about the zones, you know, I know you basically threw out 93 as a key, but,
Like something like that, we'll go ahead and codify it.
right, yeah, I think, you know,
yeah, to
consider that
like,
maybe
we
a
might
little
wanna put
more
that in there.
expansive
The-
than
the
that,
place.
but not huge, but.
Would you be okay with, me putting verbiage in there to say that the dismount zone sort of be determined by, the city administrator and staff?
Why wouldn't you
And then
determine?
make it a policy decision versus a,
Right, so we don't have to keep going back to
Right.
the
Board
ordinance.
council.
If we define them in the ordinance,
No, I
then
know,
we're stuck with
no.
those without change. So if we make it administrative, we can adapt and change as we need to without having to pass a new ordinance.
I agree with that, I was just kind of splitting the difference, saying that the drop zone, dismount zone would be from 93 to Edgewood, and all of the areas as the administration comes up, because
Yeah.
I think that one just needs to be in.
That's the one, yeah, that would
That
be.
needs to be ironclad, that really does, that one, I think.
okay, so.
It's
But
just a
leave it
minor
open so
thing,
we
but-
can expand it as needed.
We can,
Yeah, they
we can
expand
make it
from there, but
College Avenue from Edgewood to 93 and any other additional areas determined by the city administrator.
Fine,
That
that works
would
out.
work.
Right.
Okay, and then we'll work on the other part and come back. There was, I know we could talk later, but one of the things that keeps coming up, because someone made an analogy of, the requests that we keep getting for speed calming devices and people making, a position that they want a particular dismount zone. We might have to come up with internal criteria to kind of figure out, all right, how much pedestrian traffic goes through there, set a standard before we make something a dismount zone. But something to be determined internally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question. The ordinance makes it clear that you should not leave or in any way. So, your areas where scooters are, where scooters park out explicitly, downtown.
Young man.
where-
Come to the mic.
If you'll state your name and address.
Corey Glenn, 127 Clemson Place Circle, reporter for the Tiger. There appear to be no protections for where students should park. Where would you endorse the scooters being introduced? According to this ordinance, where would the scooter parking be allowed? I know that's been a problem.
So that brings up an interesting, position because we don't have any designated bicycle parking areas either. And, we are going to allow bicycles to be used unless there is a bicycle rack somewhere. And Jacob, I don't know if there's, because a lot of it's gonna depend on private property.
Yeah, right now, every every development that comes into the city pretty much has bicycle parking. But where there areas of concern are downtown, which is not getting redeveloped anything. And which doesn't require any parking, therefore doesn't require any bike parking. So that is something we're hoping to address with potential redevelopment in the downtown of like the police substation. I think one of the ideas is potentially putting in bike and I guess it'd be scooter as well, parking there. But, right now, no, there's no designated biking or like on the private properties of Earl Street and Youth Center, and those ones have bike parking in them, but nothing in the public.
Can I just say one other thing quickly, though? Whatever we do is going to be better than nothing. But whatever we do needs to be done clearly with Clemson University, or this will become the next frontier for town-gown relationships. If it's viewed as Clemson University is throwing the problem to the city, we're going to have the same issues, and I'm sure you are working with them, but it has to be clear that this is a cooperative effort and we're not the city bearing the burden.
I agree, and that's why Riley has been reporting back to the Student Senate.
Right.
I've had the university police in on our meetings. I've also shared some of this with Ms. Cooper, who's the chair of the Town and Gown with the university. So we are including them in that, but I haven't really gotten a lot of feedback other than from the students and from Riley as to what they think is fair and not fair based on the ordinance. I haven't, so I'll reach back out to Ms. Cooper and see if we can get anything from the administration on this. But he does bring up a good point as to if we're going to start allowing them, where can they park them? And when you think about the retail areas downtown, if they walk them in the area, they want to go into one of the restaurants and get a sandwich or something like that, I'm sure the business owners don't want them taking them inside the business, but then again, they don't want them stacked up outside the business either, so I'm not sure how I don't think we're prepared to address that just yet, but could be something on the drawing board to, okay, how do we address this?
The unpopular way to do that is we take a couple of parallel spots and make them scooter spots.
Ooh.
If you can get 25 scooters in 3 parallel spots, that's better than 3 cars. That's 25 individuals walking around rather than 5 or 6 maximum.
Except again, that's the exact example of the town gown thing. I've lost my parking space so the 25 students can.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I could've got 25 students and 5 cars.
So I think we just need to figure out a way to do this as a partnership.
Something else to discuss.
Something else to discuss. Andy, staff report?
First of all, if you have your schedules or your calendars with you, I would like to schedule a budget work session with you guys to discuss fund balances and general fund subsidies.
How long is that gonna be, Bob?
I'd like to do the first week of December if everyone can.
When you say first week, are you talking about the 5th?
The 2nd through the 6th. Nope, sorry, I'm looking at the bottom of December, I'm programmed weird here. So that would be the week of the 5th.
Okay.
I'm not here the 6th, 7th, and 8th. So it would need, for me, it would need to be Monday or Friday.
The Monday before the council, maybe.
Yeah, how long is it, will it be an hour?
We give you an hour and a half.
So we can meet at 5,
Sure.
4:30?
Well, the 5th is the drop-in for a council member.
Right.
We're not going to that.
You want?
The county council member, Feaster.
For, Mr. Feaster.
Feaster.
Oh, that's,
Chickens.
okay.
Now, you may,
It's on my calendar, so I just, because we got invited, but.
also reschedule the meeting. If everyone wanted to go, attend the drop-in.
Start getting tight on days after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, exactly.
Or,
All right, so,
Cause you got, how many different
because we have to do it.
meetings do you want to have in workshops? Wasn't it like 3 of them?
yeah, but I'm probably not gonna have the 3rd one for a few weeks after this one.
The 5th and.
I don't even have all the information for that.
No, do it Friday.
Mm-mm.
It won't be by the end of the year. vehicle replacement.
7 o'clock breakfast?
He said 7 o'clock.
He did say 7 o'clock.
Do you want it 6:30 better?
It could be at noon. I mean, first of all, do you want to keep the meeting on the 5th? Or do you want to move it to the 6th to go to the drop-in?
Don't we have the parade on the 6th?
Parade's on
I was gonna
the
say, we had a parade.
Yeah. That's,
Well, no,
I'm with
I was
John.
planning to
There's no
go to the
time.
drop-in and come to the,
I said, what time was the drop-in?
the drop-in's at 5.
Yeah.
And then I was gonna come to city council at 6:30, but if we're not gonna do that.
how about the 9th?
Negative. I can do breakfast or lunch.
I could do breakfast or lunch.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I don't wanna do it any later than lunch on Friday, right?
Let's do it at lunch on Friday.
If we can knock that out in an hour, that would be great.
It don't matter, I'm on annual leave. I'm on annual leave.
So she gonna stay for all of our time.
I'm sorry.
So noon on the 9th, got it.
Very much. ECMA Awards Banquet at Southern Wesleyan University, December 2nd at 7 p.m. That's where we will, not it?
That's the Christmas party.
28th, it's the 28th.
Yeah,
The
Pickens
28th.
County is the 28th.
Pickens County is the 28th.
Potato.
At 7.
1 week
At
from
Southern
today.
Wesleyan. It's the 28th.
1 week from today is
The 28th.
I cannot be
County.
there.
Yeah, so it's 7 to 8 on the 28th. We're gonna announce Police Officer and Firefighter of the Year. Holiday Banquet is on the 2nd, at 6:30 at the Madron Center, and, we will be, giving out service awards and recognizing Employees of the Year and unveiling the, new branding scheme for the
Oh, cool.
city.
At 6:30?
Yes.
The Pickens County Municipal League on the 28th is a really good event. I don't know who all signed up for done that, but the recognition is not just for Clemson, obviously it's for the county. And there was some pushback this year from the sponsor wanting to move it from a nighttime event and all that. And we should show our respect and be there anyway, but I think it's even more important now just to kind of, I think if y'all can be there. So those folks do a lot for us, and it's just, that's my plug for that one, because
Yeah, 'cause we have,
that's the one extra meeting that's worth you making.
That's 7 to 8 on the 28th.
Correct.
longer than an hour, isn't it?
They're doing a pretty tight ship on the
They
time,
get
you'd be
through it pretty
surprised.
quick.
Okay.
They don't drag it out. How many of you are going to be here on the 19th?
December.
Anybody gonna be gone on the 19th of December?
It depends on what you want.
Going through my mind too.
We have a council
What
meeting
Andy
that-
wants is to cancel the council meeting.
No, that's not, I just had two say they're gonna be out of town, I just thought I'd see if anyone
I
else.
plan to be here.
Okay.
I'll be here.
I'll be here.
I will not be here.
I mean, it's not unusual around holidays for us to run 5-person meetings. and
I
stuff.
know,
mean,
but I just, we'll just stick with it then.
Yeah.
Darn, I should've said I was gonna be gone.
We still could have, we'd have 4.
We will march on. All right, that's all I have.
We have the Wreaths Across America event on the 17th that I'm going.
Did it last year.
I know, that's why I'm going this year.
In Chattanooga.
That's that Saturday.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Now to policy action, and anyone who'd like to speak, you have 2 minutes to speak. And we ask that if you're gonna, come and speak, at the podium, state your name and your, residence, and if you're online, just raise your hand and we'll recognize you. So the first one is to consider second reading of an ordinance amending section 19-402, table of uses for non-residential districts, and section 19-405, standards for conditional use and special exceptions for non-residential districts to allow outdoor event facilities in the CM district. Jacob.
That is correct. There has been no changes since the first reading, and as basically you described right there, this is to allow outdoor events in the CM district.
Discussion or questions for Jacob? All right. Anyone would like to make a motion?
Make a motion, we approve the second reading of an ordinance amending section 19-402 as presented.
Second.
All right. Any discussion?
So again, as I said last time, I still don't think that this is in the best interest of residents of Clemson who would butt those those districts.
Any other? All right. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? Thank you.
Was that for or against, Fran?
That was for, I voted both. I'm gonna let Beverly decide how to vote.
Consider second reading of an ordinance amending section 19-1104, powers and duties of the bar to allow the Board of Architecture Review to waive architecture review standards that they feel unnecessary for small additions of 25% of the gross floor area or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less. Jacob?
I have nothing to add. There's no changes since the last, reading, and Alicia just explained correctly the ordinance.
All right. Questions? I can make a motion.
Make a motion, we approve second reading of ordinance amending section 19-1104 as presented.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. There will be no opposed. Consider second reading, I guess you just, no, this is Allison this time. Yep. Consider second reading of an ordinance to approve an infrastructure reimbursement agreement between the City of Clemson and Rutledge Development LLC for 207 Ligon Street. Alice?
Yes, there's been no changes since the first reading. Just to echo, the amount is $32,474, and it would be for 50% of the taxes, in 8 years, is how long the reimbursement would be for.
Thank you. Do you all have any questions? Anybody like to make a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the second reading of an ordinance to approve the infrastructure reimbursement agreement with, Rutledge Development LLC.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Our next, item is to consider the first reading of an ordinance amendment allowing open container in public places. Chief Campo.
Sorry.
The open container ordinance, we had the discussion, last time about the change, and I'm sorry, I walked off with that. The current ordinance, we discussed before, basically states that any publicly accessible private property in large commercial areas, the open container ordinance applies, and the revision to the ordinance allows for these places to have open containers unless the property owner posts the property to say that there's no open container allowed. Questions?
Any questions?
One quick question, is that change of mind, like, could it be daily or weekly? Like, if the churches didn't want it normally, but during game time, they were okay with it?
If they were okay with it during game time, they would have to remove the signs. So as long as the signs are up, it's enforceable. If the signs are down, it's unenforceable.
But I can change my mind if I'm a business owner?
It's entirely up to the business owner
Okay.
or property owner.
So I brought this up last time, but I just want to hear explanation again. I still think this is the reverse. I think the default, in other words, without a sign, that the default should be if you don't have a sign, it's not permitted. And the allowable sign is what has to happen. In other words, the opposite. And I still don't understand why we would do it.
Because if we did the opposite, then all the churches would have to put signs up whenever they sell their parking, if they're going to allow them to have open containers.
Sure. So they have to do that. I mean, to me, it's almost like you know, if a street sign, if there's not in my neighborhood, if there's not a speeding sign up, there's a standard speed, 25 or whatever it is. So the default is 25. Only exception is if you have a sign up that says 15 or 30 or whatever. To me, it's the same logic with this, that the default to me should be that if there's no sign up, it's not permitted, that it's only allowable if you take the action, because I think I used the example, if the sign falls down or if someone pulls it down, you now have a parking lot that's gone in the direction that it's now allowable. So to me, just like with speed, and I know there are laws both ways, I mean, regulations, but to me, the more sensible way is that you can only do it by signage, and the default is with lacking a sign, then it's not allowable. And I just don't see the
To
logic.
Fran's point there too, when you're doing that, so since the church is, and I apologize, I was missed last meeting in the conversation on it, but you're having them, they have to put up a sign for, 358 days a year, for the 7 days a year that they're okay with doing it, or, whereas if they had to put up the signs that allowed alcohol, they got to sign up for 7 days as opposed to the rest of the year. Just kind of creates more signage and less clutter.
To your point, I get your point, but when I polled the churches that I did and explained it to them,
They were okay with this route?
their first concern was, how does this affect when we sell our parking spaces? And I said, if you don't put a sign up, you can have it all, okay. I said, well, the only other thing is during the week, if someone comes in there and has an open container or whatever, that we wouldn't enforce it. And if you were having a problem, you would have to call us, and then we can enforce the trespass law or whatever if you were having a problem, and they would say, okay, we're okay with it.
But I'm not sure about the sign, but can't they just have a sign that they can, in a bucket of concrete, and on 7 days, they can wheel that sign out, put it in the parking lot? I mean, I guess I don't see the.
So when you put signs up, the problem when you go into enforcement, and Mary, you might elaborate on this, is it has to be conspicuously placed that whoever is entering onto that property would have seen the sign to know that that activity is prohibited on that property. And if they are haphazardly just putting it up and down, I would doubt very much that they're going to place them in conspicuous locations that the average person who traversed across that property would know that they could not do that activity on the property.
But it's the opposite. But the sign is not to let them know it's prohibited. It's automatically prohibited. The sign is to let them know it's allowed. Yeah. And so it's the opposite of what you just said. So 7 days, they have to track out the sign that says it's allowed, and like you just said, put it in a visible place. But to me, that's the more logical.
If you don't leave the sign, you don't drink.
Right, because if there's no sign, it's prohibited. So the onus is on the church. I agree with you. For 7 days, get that piece of concrete. John will do this because he does on a rolling cart, make it 12 feet tall.
I see your point, but I'm gonna make a couple of comments. I'll use our church as an example. We've got 2 lots involved. And so you put out, signs to church parking only and this and that and everything else, and they're ignored. And so I think that's, at least when you got the parking situation here, those spots are set up and are monitored by people, like our youth minister, and they monitor the people coming in and out from that standpoint. So that's there. And only the people that have paid for those spots park in those spots. But I'm talking about any other time, we put out a church parking only, who cares? I mean, some do it, some don't. And I'm sitting here thinking, you look at the Presbyterian church, so they would have to have 3 of them, because they got the 3 lots that kind of go up the hill there, so they have to have a sign on each one of the 3. So I don't know, to me, it's almost like it's almost, a lot more, I guess it's.
They're gonna have a sign either way, though.
I was gonna say,
But they got the sign already saying the parking is reserved. That sign's already up. We put a sign up that says parking is reserved, and we have to bolt it up and everything for the games and all. So it's just another, I see your point, but it's just another sign to put up.
Put that sign up on that day, so you cannot drink here unless you see this sign.
Well, okay.
And
That's the way it is now, so
the
your
flip
default will be
side,
not drink.
the flip side I'll point out is now if we do it that way, Patrick Square, Dockside, Patrick Milliken, all of those developments that have privately owned public property will now have to put a sign up at every entrance to there saying, hey, you can have an open container if you want.
And having a sign, that's what I was gonna say, that
Right. So
invites it all the time, and if they're going to allow it, by having the sign that says you can drink here, you're inviting drinking for those places. So like, if I own a private parking lot, I could put it up and just be like, hey, come drink here, no problem, year round. And that's fine too, on the flip side, not have, just, if you don't want it, put up a sign that says no open containers here. It takes care of it. This is overcomplicating
But I think
this
that's,
incredibly.
I think I think I'm gonna make a motion, but we can just vote and see. I think the logic is the opposite of what you say. It's 7 days a week or 7 days a year.
You're only thinking about the church and the seven
No,
days.
even in Patrick's Square, because so they'll put a permanent sign up that says open containers allowed, and then they're done. They don't have to do anything the rest of the year. They
They'll
have
put up
their
just
sign
their
up.
events.
Either, I mean, but if it's gonna be like Patrick's Square and they want it year-round, they put the sign up and it's year-round. Someone's gotta put a sign up year-round either way, it sounds like to me. But anyway, just.
Would that be accurate? I mean, do they have a
So
post
my
sign?
concern though is if you put it up, what are the property lines? Because if you put it up and say, you can have an open container here, and they walk off the property line over here where it's prohibited, now I'm nailing them for having an open container because they walked off the property line. Whereas if you're putting it as you enter the property where it's prohibited, it's clear, and if you walk off of that property, same thing. I mean, unless you have too many egress.
Signs work the same way?
I don't think it
I don't see
matters.
how signs work differently.
I just
don't think there's gonna be that many people that are worried about having the signs, whether it's for or against.
So I think, the problem here is that the case you made and case I made can be the exact same whether it's sign or no sign, because as John said, the property line is gonna be the property line. Someone's gonna be inconvenienced, but I think we need to just vote and move on. And I'm gonna make a motion to change that word, so.
Would you wanna go ahead and?
Well, we already got it. This on the table already?
No,
We gotta make the motion first.
Nobody made a motion
I'm
yet.
just kinda curious.
The motion.
There's no motion on the table yet.
Someone has to make a motion.
Any other-
Somebody has to
Then
make
a motion.
Right, so somebody making a motion.
For the original, right? I make a motion that we consider the first reading of an ordinance amendment allowing open container in public places.
Second.
I'll make a motion to amend
Okay.
that in section C, that instead of it says that, let me make sure I'm in the right place, prohibited, the containers are prohibited, it says that containers are allowed. Line down, and any other place in here that matters. In other words, so that will now would read in that third line, property posted using the section means the property owner or manager places a sign at the entrance and exit to said property that clearly warn the general public that open containers are allowed, and warn's not the right way, notify the public that open containers are allowed on said property.
Second.
I caution that because of A, we're gonna have to reword A.
So, we can reword it. Where so?
Because in A, if you look at the top, I only added 4 words in there that said alleyways or other public places that are properly posted within the incorporated city limits. So if you're going to allow it, I have to reverse that and we'll have to reword it. If you're gonna post a sign to allow it, I'm gonna have to reword the first part.
I think the motion would be to, amend the, proposed ordinance to make it consistent with the motion to amend.
Right, that's what I said, other language in here that would have to reflect that also.
You have that, Beverly? I didn't think so.
She just said that the ordinance, any other language in the ordinance that needs to be changed and be consistent with this amendment would just need to be updated.
Okay.
That's very simple, and you just do it after the meeting, and
That the amendment.
so you talk to all the churches.
To make it consistent.
And talk to all, I talked to a select handful. So I talked to Fort Hill, I talked to, the one on 93, I talked to St. Andrews, and I tried to get a hold of, First Baptist, I wasn't able to get a hold of anybody there, and you and I talked about the Lutheran Church.
Talking about Patrick Square and the other areas that Bob was.
Square, I talked to Chris Hodge, I did not talk to anyone specifically at Dockside, but seeing how they're being developed, it would be applicable.
So now Cameron can put open containers allowed in the parking lot behind Tiger Town. And anybody can go back there and drink, have open containers. If, you know, another bar or whatever goes in where Knickerbockers is, they can have open containers there. If a business
Backstreet
down.
parking?
What's that?
Backstreet's parking lot, is that theirs down there?
Backstreets has a parking lot down there. And I'm sure we could sit here and we could come up with a bunch of other places that we're thinking about that, again, it seems we're thinking about churches and 7 days of the year. If you think about everything else that can happen 365 days a year, where drinking outside can be invited by having that sign, having the sign say open containers allowed, I'm less as the person who is for, it says, let's suspend the open container law in downtown and all that kind of stuff. I'm with the chief that I think it works better to have the places that want it prohibited there, because when the sign goes to open containers allowed, you're inviting it where it might not happen without the sign there. Like, but it's like, hey, I didn't know I could drink there.
I think, you know, students
We're
are fast enough to figure that out. Sign or no sign, they will know. I can't imagine any student going, oh my God, I never realized that.
Yeah, well, when the signs
Maybe
go
you
up,
should just
it's gonna
say
become
prohibited,
very obvious.
because what you're talking about opens up to a whole bunch of parties and drinking in all these different parking lots, and maybe it should just stay prohibited everywhere, period. Because what you just described to me sets up a whole bunch of parking lot parties all around town.
So.
I'm just saying, I don't think it's gonna be an issue without the opening up with a bunch of, yeah. You're making it an issue by saying open containers allowed, whereas this.
Yeah, but it's the same issue, if signs say open containers allowed, or other signs, other places say open containers prohibited, it's the exact same issue. Let me call the
I'm
question.
saying not that many people are putting up open containers prohibited signs.
But students will know that if it has a sign, it's permitted, or if it doesn't, depending on what we vote on in a moment. It's not gonna change the students' drinking behaviors. They're pretty
Cameron
smart.
serves drinks out of the back of the tire, people are gonna figure that out without.
Well, Cameron would be violating his liquor license.
It's liquor, but you can go back there in that,
But if somebody
parking lot.
walked into that lot with an unopened can and then opened it, then it would be legal.
So we'll call the question. There's a amended motion on the
We
table.
change it.
It was second.
The meeting.
So, all those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed?
Motion fails.
Motion fails.
Okay. Now we have the other motion on the table. Any discussion on that last motion? We did.
This is the original motion.
The original.
The original motion.
Okay. All those in,
I'm sorry, I was just gonna point out that I believe representatives of the university are here about a piece of property they own within the city that might be subject to this new rule. I didn't know if they had any thoughts about making their parking lot a drinking or a no drinking area.
When you're going to court, you might wanna.
Might need it. I mean, we got you there.
But legally.
Scared it off.
Legally.
you got discussion?
Well, I've had this, so if we don't support this one, it just stays where you cannot drink in a public place.
And the churches would.
Have to deal with their game day
It would
situation.
stay the way it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing would change.
Because I'm inclined to move it forward, I'm not sure I'm inclined to vote for it again. I mean, I kind of feel like, not totally comfortable with where things are.
Stays the way it is, which the churches would not, if the church.
Nobody would be able to have an open
You
container.
would not be
on
able to
any-
have an open
Any publicly
container.
owned property. You wouldn't be able to have it, at Patrick Square, Dockside, anything that's publicly accessible.
But you could get
Open to the
permitted to
public.
do it or something. So if Patrick Square has something on their green, they could get a permit to do that, or not.
They would have to get the permit that they would have to ask for
They couldn't have that, your church.
has to do with selling. They would have to do a special event permit and ask the city to lift the open container
Kind of like when
for,
we do downtown on the.
for a public.
So there is a mechanism to have
If
these
it fails,
events.
this is a real challenge now for the churches, for example, for this coming, next year.
So technically, the way that ordinance is written, the churches fall into, you can't allow people to have open containers on the property. And to some degree, and Mary, I'd have to ask, Tiger Park, if they open to the public and anybody can walk on or off of their property,
You have to have a wristband.
I don't know how they control access to their property. If it's deemed publicly accessible to members of the public, then the ordinance could apply.
So what brought all this up? What brought this up?
The issue at Patrick Square with their square that they own and some of the streets that they still own, having events to where they can, traverse, and then with Packlick Milliken going in and their development coming up, and then Dockside, the area, the commercial area that's not core property, where the brewery and the Your Pie and all those places are, on their specific, platted area, they can have open container, but once you step off of that, this ordinance would apply.
For me, I'll repeat it, I'm gonna vote just to advance, and I'm not certain I'll be voting this way next time.
We need to have some amendments or other discussion.
Correct. Just gotta have a second reading.
So we'll go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? All right. So, what's going on with it? Our next is consider the first reading of an ordinance amendment for courts to be allowed, we finally get the court, to be allowed,
for this.
to be an allowable use in zone district. Jacob.
Okay, as, exactly what you explained. This is allowing courts in the CM district. It is a conditional use. There are several, we feel, are reasonable conditions that we have talked with the university about, since this is primarily for the university to be able to have a court at Gentry Hall. We don't anticipate any other municipalities to try to put a court in our city.
I move we approve the first reading of an ordinance to allow court in the CM zoning district.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Are y'all gonna allow drinking in your?
Try to render this decision, no question.
All in favor, raise your right hand. All right.
Celebrating or?
Either or.
Thank you. Next is, check you up again. Consider first reading of an ordinance amendment to require pet waste stations in all high-density developments.
Correct. This is, so any apartment building, townhouses, anything that we consider, more than single-family houses, they will be required to have pet waste stations and maintain them. This is to clean up animal waste.
Any questions? All right. Make a motion?
Make a motion, we approve a first reading of an ordinance to amend to require pet waste stations in all high-density developments as presented.
Second.
All right. No further, any discussion? I don't think this is. All right, all those in favor, raise your right hand. No opposed? All right. You just have to stand here with us today.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I'm making your meeting so long.
Consider first reading of an ordinance amendment to require bikeway installation for simple lot subdivisions.
Correct. So this is, as we're expanding the bike paths throughout the city, we, have added to the ordinance that if a bike path is, where the designated bike path is in front of your lots that you're doing a subdivision of, creation of 2 or more buildable lots, you will need to install the bike path for that section.
Okay. Any questions for Jacob? All right, and I'd like to make a motion.
Make a motion, we approve first reading of an ordinance to amend to require bikeway installation for simple lot subdivisions as presented.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All right. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you so much.
On to, other policy items, consider adopting the,
We missed one.
did I miss
H.
one? I'm sorry.
H.
I'm passing you. I'm on the roll. H, consider first reading of an ordinance amendment to adopt South Carolina State mandated building and related codes for section 5.1, codes adopted effective January 1, 2023.
Thank you. And this is no change from the discussion we had at the last meeting. The ICC puts out codes, the state is able to amend, and then they adopt them, and then the municipalities, if they would like to enforce them, has to adopt them as well.
And we can't enhance them, we can only approve what is
What
provided,
is,
what is provided BC. I mean, this is a discussion last time, so I just like to
Yeah.
clarify that
It's
there's
nice
not
to
an
think we can do
opportunity to
something.
enhance this.
Right.
Good
I move we
clarification.
approve a first reading of an ordinance to amend Chapter 5, Section 1 of the Clemson City Code.
A second.
Second.
All right, no further discussion. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All right. Now on to other policy items. Consider adopting the 2023 City Council meeting schedule. Deborah? No changes? As is. Any questions?
So I have about a 15-minute filibuster on this.
Justin, you have it?
This really will affect my Monday night.
Apparently your Thursday nights to start
Besides friends, filibuster, any discussion? All right, anybody like to make a motion to approve the council meeting?
Make a motion, we approve the 2023 city council meeting schedule.
Second.
Or adopt, I'm sorry.
Second.
Adopt.
Adopt, approve, yeah.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. So moved.
All right, we're on purchase.
Our second item, consider approval of purchasing an access control system for the Calhoun Bridge Center on Butler Street from Carolina Burglar and Fire Alarm Company in the amount of $17,785 plus tax. Lowell?
So this will be an expansion of, existing system we have in place. We have an access control system, which, the main server is here at City Hall, controls here, controls police. It will also control the addition over here. The price here is for the equipment. Prices for technology have gone up the past couple of years, since y'all know, a year and a half especially. So the doors over at Butler Street are all metal. They're like exterior frontage doors, so we gotta do mag locks, which are much more expensive instead of just strikes. But we're getting ready to install access control here at Parks and Recreation with the same swipe card, technology. We have a backup system, which, at Cat Bus, if something went down here, we could incorporate that side back and forth. So this would be, as a result in the issues we've had up there from a security standpoint. I did include, the other, nonprofit on the other side of the building, their main entrance door. So they would have, get a card from us that are minimal in cost, just a little chip card, that would allow them to utilize that so they could have tracking of it. But this is basically just adding the access controls to, I think, about 6 alarm controls that are mag locks and another 3 strike inside. So we're talking about the front door on, TAC and CAM. We're talking about the back door to where they have the concert series outside. We're talking about the hall, at the end of the hall door on the art center side. There's one room that we have teachers' entrance, from the other side of the parking lot. This is still entrance to that side. And then we have the museum piece, the Arts Museum piece, the African American, piece, and then the door on the front side of the, nonprofit.
Thank you.
So, does this cover the doors for the Child Development Center?
It covers the front door of the main entrance right now. They have one entrance on that side. I talked with the fire marshal because they come over to the Art Center and African American Museum side to do laundry.
Right.
That door in itself right now, I've asked, Tony to, give me a quote on converting that to a card reader. The equipment's there so that we could at least control access. My concern was that they could get in this way, but egress, I thought maybe it needed to be the other way, but because of the excess doors that we have on that side, we don't need it. But I only included one door on that side.
I thought there was a door that went out to the playground. Is that not true?
I'm not super familiar with that side. I know all of the classrooms have an exterior door for egress. But those would not be included in this. But if we needed to add one, we always could.
Okay, there's a hallway door that goes out to the playground, and then there's also a door in the cafeteria that goes out to the rear courtyard.
That door is included.
Okay.
It seems like you ought to, it seems like we're securing every door but one, so we've kind of sort of left the building unsecured by not securing that door going out to the public.
Well, there are a lot of other exterior doors. A lot of the classrooms have an exterior door. We did not include those. Those doors remain locked, but those are egress. I think they probably utilize those to get out to maybe the playground.
Those have stripes though?
No.
Those are not the metal ones?
The stripes,
Those doors actually in those classrooms, they would only be probably for emergency use only, right?
yeah.
But that playground door, they use that door every day.
If that's a door you want to add, then, I'm sure you could approve me, expanding that one more door.
Wouldn't you think so, Andy?
There's small fences in the way between someone and that door.
I can't remember whether you go out that door into that playground, or you go out that door and then you have to enter the playground separately.
They're going into a fenced-in area.
You do go into the playground. I mean, you can easily scale a fence, an adult could.
Yeah, I mean, you just hop right over it.
Okay, but it does go into the fenced-in area. Okay.
But at any point, we could add to the system.
Okay, well,
It would probably be good, especially on the child development center side. Because in a classroom, you're gonna have a teacher, there's people gonna be in there, but that would be like an unmanned door.
And all of the doors that we have, they have a motion sensor. If that fails as a push to exit, obviously, if power goes out, this is something they would still have to manually lock the key at the end of the day, just because if it loses power, we don't have a generator out there. Police is the only building right now that we have access control where they don't have to lock the door because they have a generator.
as with the fire alarm that we're doing for the child development center, which sadly we're not doing with this crowd, is this equipment available, or is it gonna be a 6-month lag?
No, we had, the last order I did, when we did the police department, it took quite a while to get that equipment. I forget how long it took for that, but
There were supply chain issues.
yeah, right now, I don't think there's an issue.
Okay,
I think within probably 3 weeks, 3-4 weeks.
okay.
But I would say when we do get to these conversations, I'm kind of going off topic here, but we get conversations about these fire panels, we need to make sure they're cellular capable. We need to get away from copper, either cellular capable or IP capable, just because copper here, you talk about our connectivity issues, that's copper. It's problems we're having, so.
Any other discussion? All right. Anybody like to make a motion?
I move we approve the fire alarm purchase for the Calhoun Bridge Center.
Second.
All right. No further discussion?
It's not a fire alarm.
Yeah, it's a access control
Access
system,
control.
No,
which is somewhat different.
access control system then,
Do we,
The dollar amount.
As presented.
as presented.
Yes. It's $17,700.
does that include, were you saying that did you want to make a motion to amend it to add the extra money for that additional door?
Yes, I would,
Just make a motion, I'll get the quote.
You can make that the original motion, you could just make it as presented with an amendment for the.
Yeah, so that's been moved and seconded already.
Yes,
the
we gotta
original.
handle that.
So now you're gonna have to make a motion to add the money for,
Okay, I'll make a motion that we add the, rear access door, on the Child Development Center to, the, addition of the, access control system.
second.
All right. Any further discussion? Are we doing it right?
You do good, vote on the motion to amend.
All those in favor of the amended motion, raise your right hand.
Thank you.
Technically, you should vote on the motion as amended, but I think
Is it okay?
I think
it'll apply.
That'll work. Consider adopting the updated Clemson Area Transit ADA Plan. Sandy? That's with the,
Going through our annual or our 3-year FCA audit, we learned a couple of things with our ADA plan. One thing with the ADA plan, we had in there that we would go off route 0.3 of a mile to pick up an ADA passenger. However, we contract that service out. So by contracting that service out, if we have going off route 0.3 of a mile in our plan, any of you in here could call and say, I need you to come off and pick me up. So we had to take that out of our plan. So that's one change that we've made to the plan. Basically, the only change that we made to this plan was we removed off route. We're a fixed route system. We will stay on the fixed route, and any ADA passenger will be contracted out through Senior Solutions.
Okay. Any other questions?
There was one other thing, I guess maybe I misread it, because it says something that you don't want to be able to take summer camp kids to locations and those types of things.
That was part of the triennial that we went through as well. That goes back to an in-kind service. We learned through the FTA that in-kind services are charter services, and we are not able to do a charter service. So not being able to do a charter service means that I can't go and pick a kid up or pick a group up and take them to a ball game or take them to the skating park and do things like that. If we do that, we're in violation with federal money, and we will lose our funding if we're able to do that or if we continue to do that.
We used to be able to do it when we were small.
Now.
Small rural.
Small rural.
And we, just to make sure we never got in trouble with it, we made sure it was 1% or less of our total service.
Correct.
But then when we turned large urban, they said fixed route only.
Right, and that was something that was not brought up in the first triennial 3-4 years ago. This is something they drilled very hard this go around. And the comment was made, you are not doing football and those kind of things. If it's written into the contract, then it can be provided if it's written into a contract, but it cannot be the in-kind that we always got away with. We always went through our city administrator and said, I need a letter saying we're gonna do this in-kind, and that's a violation with my federal funds.
Okay. Any other
Possible for us to set up a contract in the amount of $1 and just have something boilerplate that we could have a contract per request?
Contract, as long as it's on the hourly, the salary that everybody else will be paying.
$80 an hour.
I'm sorry, they really drilled us hard this go around. I know Robert will receive the report when it comes in. We had a couple of findings. We have worked real hard to get those findings taken care of before the report comes out. The majority of our findings were with Senior Solutions, and we are really working with them more closely to clarify and do all that up.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody like to make a motion?
I make a motion, we adopt the updated Clemson Area Transit ADA plan.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All right. Our last one is consider adopting a resolution committing matching funds for an ACR grant to help fund the police substation renovation and other downtown improvements. Jacob.
That is correct. So we have found a grant with the potential of paying for half of a project that is intended to bring in economic development to an area like a downtown, revitalize downtown. So through the Appalachian Regional Council, we are asking them for $683,250, and our matching would be 50%, so another $683,250, which brings us to the total project cost of $1,366,500. And that's the estimated project cost for the revamp of the plaza associated with the police substation, as well as upgrading the electrical system down there, so we can we can host events down there without blowing fuses all the time, put in some more decorative lighting, increase the sidewalk size in that area. And we do hope, like, as we're, designing that plaza, I think one thing that has come up multiple times is bicycle parking and, places for scooters and things like that. So I think that we can look at designing that into part of that project.
Question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, my just question was, because the grant's up to $750,000, and we know that because these numbers came together about a year or so ago, do we not, and we have $775,000 in the reserve fund, so we can match a grant up to $750. Do we want to adjust this to take advantage of the full potential grant, just knowing that we're seeing cost overruns and everything across the board when work's bid out now.
Yeah, we can adjust that if you'd like.
And that's just I don't know how line item, how specific there's gotta be, but I just think that with where the world is right now with concrete and everything
And that was,
else.
I didn't know if there was, what the maximum, is that all, yeah, is there anything else that we need to consider as we go
I
through
think you
this?
can get there within this even.
Yeah, that's my question.
I don't know if ARC allows contingency or not, but I think you can easily put in an inflation factor over the next year.
Yeah, I'm positive we can adjust.
That would be my one suggestion is that, I mean,
Okay.
The only thing that I was gonna add is if a motion is made, it's ARC, not ACR.
Oh, sorry.
not a problem.
So before someone makes a motion, that
Yeah.
motion should be to,
$750 to adjust the budget.
yeah, to adjust the budget based on inflation, appropriately for inflation,
Yeah,
whatever
and-
that amount.
Truthfully, it was mostly coming to you guys to kind of reiterate that you're on board with this before we apply for the grant, because if, we don't want to apply for the grant if you guys aren't, but we don't have to have the actual commitment to the
Okay.
dollar
Yeah, 'cause
amount.
we're adopting a resolution, is
Right.
what.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
But you need this resolution.
Yeah.
At
To
some
move
point I
forward.
will, not technically for this first stage of the application, but yes.
Doesn't have.
We're good.
So anyone like to,
So we are making the resolution, I mean, I have no problem adopting the resolution with the language in there. Well, let's just approve it, and if they don't need it, they don't use it.
Yep.
Or let's vote for it, excuse me.
I was gonna say, you can vote and then decide.
So
We're just
I
at
would-
the pre-application stage.
I would make a motion that we would adopt a resolution committing matching funds for an ARC grant to help fund the community police substation renovation and downtown improvements. And I would adjust the budget for inflation and apply for a full grant of up to $750,000 with matching city funds of $750,000 for $1.5 million project with inflation-based adjustments.
Good.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All right,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Are there any mayor council reports, comments, new business?
Just one, so the last week or 2 weeks ago, the conversation with council went very well, thanks to Robert and,
What's her name?
Cat.
and this guy here. I'll tell you something interesting. There were 2 people at that meeting from Camelot representing the Camelot neighborhood formally. And they were very active in getting things that Camelot needed. I think there was something about lighting and something about speed. But the point being, I don't know how we would do this, but it would be worth trying to communicate to other neighborhoods that if they have formal or even informal organizations, being at that meeting really matters a lot. So Catherine, I know you weren't representing that neighborhood, but that whole Wren group up there that was talking about traffic along Issaquah. So I just think if people were there, because it dawned on me during the meeting, it's not the number of people that are there, it's the number of the actions that we take. And there were several actions taken, and being there in a formal way with those 2 people really made a difference for Camelot. I don't know if we want to sort of get that word out to other neighborhoods, but I think it's important for neighborhoods to get a notion that that's the meeting that you want to have people at and represent you, because, again, things that come up there, Andy, within a week or 2 is probably addressing those. So I think it was an interesting dynamic to see them at that meeting and how successful it can be for their neighborhood by being present and being pretty vocal about it. Catherine, did you say, that same sense, right? It was,
Oh, absolutely. Well, you and I were sort of laughing that we didn't know that the city did water testing.
yeah.
We didn't know how streetlights exactly worked in terms of getting, if you have a critical mass, and then the city will pay for it. Which we all pay for, they're not free. but-
Brandon, one of your last things you do, why don't you write that up on for next door?
Am I dying?
Yeah.
Don't you,
Yes, we all are.
What of your last
We all
council
are.
act?
Oh, my last council act.
See, actually, John, I would suggest that since he's not on council anymore, that he actually spearheaded an ongoing capacity as
There you
a
go.
consultant on that.
That's fine, John, my heart stopped for me, John. I thought you saw something I didn't. But it really does matter. I'm going to spread the word in my neighborhood that we need to get together and maybe think in terms of what our neighborhood needs and have a couple of representatives come to that meeting. Catherine?
I'm moving on to the next subject.
Okay.
I just wanted to give a shout out to Jaquel Durham and the Little John Community Center for the turkey dinner and giveaway yesterday. I don't know what the final count of bags donated was, but we stuffed a whole bunch of bags with collards and sweet potatoes, and then, but Jaquel put it all together, with sponsors and everything, and it was a remarkable event.
All the turkeys were gone, and I went to take some to the, Karen, and, we loaded them in, probably loaded 10 or 12 in the back of the truck, and by the time I sat there for 10 more minutes just to see where they all came and got them, but we ended up taking 5 or 6 of the collared bags to Karen, to the, Karen Carter, the.
Clemson Community Care. Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Any other items? All right. Well, we are going into executive session. If someone would like to make a motion, executive session to appoint backlog prosecutor, discussion of employment, appointment, compensation, promotion, demotion, discipline, or release of an employee, a student, or a person regulated by a public body, or the appointment of a person to a public body.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, raise your right hand. We shall return.
Did they find out if the leaf pickup?
We're working on it right now. The problem is, we didn't have one for leaves.
That was the brush one.
Had brush, but Cody's worked with Tyler, they're making it.
Okay, but is the leaf pickup miss this.
You're gonna miss this, just don't know it yet.
Let me know when you're ready.
Oh, it's my bedtime.
All right, we're back from executive session. Would someone like to make a motion to go into regular session?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. All right, we came back, from executive session and made, some discussions and, made a decision, and so, somebody like to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion the city council appoint Kurt Tavernier as a special prosecutor for the city of Clemson, with a contract to be negotiated by the city administrator and reporting to the city administrator.
Second.
Any discussion? No discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All right. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor, raise your right hand.
Vote with your feet.
All right.
I like that.
Get up and leave.
Done?